Well, well, well. The stars of And Just Like That will not shut up. It just continues to get worse and worse. And today, I read to you from Vogue, Cynthia Nixon's new interview. I'm Megan Fox with pjmedia.com. Check out my columns every day on pjmedia.com. But right now, I need to share with you this article from Vogue. Now, I have not read I haven't read it yet, so I'm going to be reacting to it in real time with you. Cynthia Nixon on Politics of the Gilded Age, which, by the way, I have so much to say. Holy shit. I'm on episode 3 of The Gilded Age, and I'm going to quit watching it now. And it is so much rewriting of history. It is so pissing me off. I need to do a video about it, but I still haven't been able to form the words. But for one, the black character that's the secretary, I'm going to forget her name now all of a sudden. But she goes and gets a job at a black newspaper. And at the newspaper, they have the journalist there making cracks about the Republican Party in 1880 something. Let me tell you something. You know who the first elected black people in our country were in 1870? They were Republicans, all of them. The Democrat Party did not have a black representative in Congress until 1920 something. Might even have been 1930. Look it up if you don't believe me. Look it up. Every major black elected official from the very first, from the 1800s, were all Republicans. And there's a reason for that, but I'm not going into it now. But anyway, they're lying. They're lying in this thing. They're lying on the Gilded Age about the politics of the time. They're totally lying. Cynthia Nixon on the Politics of the Gilded Age and the Emancipation of Miranda Hobbes. All right, this is by Liam Hess in Vogue. In the summer of 2018, you would have had every reason to believe that Cynthia Nixon had happily waved goodbye to her illustrious 3-decade acting career. Throughout the deciding months of New York's Democratic gubernatorial primary, even as Andrew Cuomo maintained a steady lead over her growing support from progressives, the so-called Cynthia effect seemed to signal a future in politics for Nixon that could have gone well beyond the typical celebrity campaign. No, she never had a chance. No, she didn't. Then, as quickly as it seemed to have arrived, her run was over, with Cuomo's establishment ties and big league backers proving insurmountable. For those who opposed her, it goes without saying that the decision hasn't aged well. But while Nixon's political dreams may have been temporarily finished, she lost none of her momentum. She simply channeled it elsewhere. I mean, a political campaign does take a lot out of you, says Nixon, laughing from her home in Manhattan. And so I took some time to recover. That was very needed and very welcome. Nixon's recovery period after a year-long slog through the rough and tumble of New York politics didn't last long, however. Within months, she had signed up for a role in Ryan Murphy's horror series Ratched, playing in typically Murphy-esque touch of metacasting the California governor's press secretary with political ambitions of her own. So again, she's playing herself. Cynthia Nixon plays herself. News at 11. And now in 2022, it feels like Nixon is having one of her busiest years ever. First, with the return of her beloved Sex and the City character Miranda Hobbes in the show's reboot and Just Like That, and then with her role in HBO's period spectacular The Gilded Age. Created by Julian Fellows, the British mastermind behind Downton Abbey, the long-awaited HBO historical drama is set in the grand halls and drawing rooms of 1880s New York society, following the shifting fortunes of the city's old guard as it reluctantly absorbs a nascent class of flashy industrialists. Nixon is Ada Brooke, the more kindly sister of Christine Baranski's snooty socialite Agnes, with the spinster's stuffy mansion sitting opposite a palatial townhouse constructed by the newest wealthy family on the block. Enlivened by the arrival of her estranged niece, Marion, played by newcomer Louisa Jacobson, Meryl Streep's youngest daughter. Oh, I didn't know that. Marion is Meryl Streep's youngest daughter. Huh. Nixon plays Ada with warmth and naivete, even as a steelier sense of resolve bubbles under the surface and eventually emerges as the series progresses. To step into the world Nixon began, where else, by rereading books by Edith Wharton and Henry James. I found them very helpful to kind of get the interior life in what the feel of the time was, she says. Also on hand to help her get into the spirit of the piece was the sheer grandiosity of the project, with budgets generous enough to include multiple historical advisors, lavish costuming, and no expense spared full-scale sets. You know what, though? I have to say, with all that money, it looks cheap. And it's the way they're filming it. The filming it, it makes it look like a soap opera instead of, like what Downton Abbey, how that looked. It actually doesn't look good. "It was astonishing," says Nixon. "I can't think of another production I've been involved in that was so lavish and so large and so sweeping," which makes it even worse that it looks so bad. She recalls one day of filming a scene in which Ada and Marion visit the original Bloomingdale's store on the Upper East Side of the 19th century, the exteriors of which were recreated in the upstate town of Troy, New York, as being particularly jaw-dropping. "I only had one day there, and we all had our trucks and trailers parked in this slightly unprepossessing part of town," Nixon remembers. "I was put in my costume, and I opened the door, and there was a town square as far as the eye could see, with a war memorial in the middle, and horses and carriages, and every storefront created to seem like it was 140 years ago. I had never seen anything like it. It was extraordinary." While Nixon's initial enthusiasm for the project lay in the evident charm of her part, "I don't always get to play these gentle, loving, hard-on-their-sleeve kind of characters, so it was a nice change," she says. She was also eager for reunion with Baranski. The pair first worked together on a Broadway play in 1984, where despite just a 14-year age gap, Baranski played Nixon's mother, a fact both find amusing in hindsight. "I heard a rumor that they were trying to get Christine, so I texted her immediately and said, 'Is it true? Is it true?'" Nixon recalls. Their existing rapport made establishing a sense of intimacy between the sisters simple. "We always talked about Ada and Agnes as if they were an old married couple with all of those little irritations. And I remember Christine saying that playing a married couple is one of the hardest things to do because it's very hard to recreate that with someone you don't know so well," says Nixon. "I think we love each other and we trust each other and we understand each other, so we had a real head start." When it came to Ada alone, though, Nixon notes that her inspiration for the character lay somewhat closer to home, namely in the form of her late godmother. She was single and had no children, but she was not a person who felt pity for herself, Nixon remembers. "I have to say, I really thought about my godmother a lot and her love of young people and her avid interest in everything going on in the world. She had dozens of godchildren and she populated her life with young people, which I think kept her very young. Ada has a similar relationship with Marion and is hopeful that as societal attitudes toward women evolve, her niece will have a better life than her own. I think Ada is so excited to be able to help guide and shepherd that young woman in a way no one shepherded her, and so her life kind of fell by the wayside," says Nixon. "It's a chance for Ada to vicariously review her own life and how it could have turned out differently." I will say, and I'm stopping reading right now, I have liked Nixon's character in The Gilded Age better as each episode goes on. I think she's doing a better job. I'm not seeing so much Cynthia as more the character, but I don't think that this show is very good, and so her character is growing on me. But now that the political stuff, they're injecting this lying political agenda into this show, now I can't stomach it. It's so bad. So let's see if they're gonna get into this or not. Of course, no historical drama is just a historical drama. The tensions that underpin the Gilded Age, particularly its exploration of the economic inequality that accompanied the rise of the new millionaire class and the poorer communities it exploited, are eerily timely. After all, the show is hardly a museum piece when the millionaires are now billionaires and the sources of income are no longer railroads or mining, but the data surveillance and worker exploitation that exist in the shadow of big tech. Given that some of the core tenets of Nixon's political platform were tackling income inequality, establishing universal health care, and providing support for working class families, how, though? By raising taxes on the rest of us, like who can barely afford to live here anymore? Like, stop it. These New York politicians are killing me. We have the highest property tax in the nation. And what are they doing with it? Has it done anything to solve income inequality? No. They're so full of crap. If Cynthia Nixon wants equality, she should give her income away to poor people, and she should take a minimum wage. If she really believes in income equality, I would expect her to do that. but she doesn't. It's nonsense. She just wants you and I to pay for income equality, but not her. She's going to keep her $10 million that she made on And Just Like That. She's going to keep that. She's not giving it away to poor families in New York. Pay attention to who she gives her money to. It's, Barney's or wherever. There are so many parallels, she says. The crushing poverty, the issues of women fighting to be treated equally, of people of color and African American people fighting to be treated equally, and immigrants grappling with their place in a new country. No, I disagree. It is so much different now than it was in the 1880s. Is she fucking crazy? Like, name one thing women can't do today that come on, one thing. Name one thing Black people can't do. Name one thing that anybody can't do in this country today. Immigrants. There's nothing. There's nothing left. I would say we've made some progress, although in terms of immigration, I'm not even sure that's true. Oh, come on. But these are definitely themes that are very, very alive today. No less political, albeit in an entirely different form, were the circumstances of Nixon's return to that beloved lawyer, Miranda Hobbes, in And Just Like That. Oh, here we go. Are you ready? Conversations around reviving Sex in the City first began during the early months of the pandemic. By January 2021, HBO had ordered a full series to a rapturous response from the show's ever-loyal fans. But for Nixon, returning to Sex in the City came with caveats, one of which was that the show would, well, no longer be the show at all. Oh, you mother... Ugh! When we were in discussions about whether to go back, I really wanted to be sure it wasn't a reboot, says Nixon, who also ended up directing an episode of the series. The world is very different now, not just because of COVID, not just because of Trump, not just because of Black Lives Matter, not just because of global warming. We are absolutely a comedy, but to do a lighthearted show that didn't acknowledge any of these things would have seemed incredibly tone deaf. So I'm very proud of it in that sense. A comedy? Cynthia Nixon thinks what she gave you was a comedy. Did you feel like laughing at all? Because I'm still angry about all it did was make me angry. It didn't make me laugh at all. The only thing that made me laugh was the entertainment YouTube channels that popped up around this show, dragging it, like the Drag Dungeon podcast and Real Housewives recaps and Diego Knows and Kate Great Beauty. Those people made me laugh, but certainly not And Just Like That. Moving on. Unexpectedly, many of the most heated conversations surrounding the new show have centered on Miranda, more specifically the whirlwind romance she shared with Sara Ramirez's non-binary comedian and podcast host Che Diaz, her implied alcohol dependence, and the fraying relationship with her husband, an ultimate fan favorite Sex and the City man, if the online chatter has been anything to go by, Steve Brady, played by David Eigenberg. Given the internet's fervid interest in the show's most controversial love triangle since Carrie, Aiden, Big, I feel I almost need to read Nixon her Miranda rights, so to speak, before she goes on the record about anything related to the subject. How closely has she been following the discourse? I think I'm fairly aware, Nixon says, before breaking out into a guilty laugh. I get a sense by what people ask me about it in interviews, mostly. How does she feel about the arguments that Miranda's character has completely changed, that she's lost some of the clear-headedness or self-awareness that many associate her with from the original run of the show? I think that's a bizarre reaction, Nixon says firmly. First of all, I think Miranda is brave. Of course you do. You think she's stunning and brave. We know. Leaving your husband, destroying your kid, it's all stunning and brave. We know. Especially if it's done for woke points with one of the woke members of the crew. And I think Miranda is charging forward. She doesn't know where she's going exactly, but she knows she has to go somewhere. And I think that's always been true of Miranda, right? No, I don't. That Miranda always knew where she was going. She always had a clear head on her shoulders. That's nonsense. Moving on. Miranda's very smart. She's very tenacious. But the idea that she's level-headed, she's never been level-headed. What? She's a loose cannon, a very opinionated loose cannon. She's always been a bull in a china shop and losing her temper and blowing things up and then having to backtrack when she calms down. I feel like what Miranda does on And Just Like That is incredibly brave. Incredibly brave, folks. Incredibly brave. She gives up her very lucrative corporate job and goes back to try to make something more of her life. Yeah, but then she throws it away. She doesn't do that either. As Miranda says, we're not old, we're 55. I mean, you're certainly closer to the end than the beginning, but if you're not happy with where you are, you still have a lot of time to make a change. Yeah, and God help the people you have to run over to do it, like your husband and your son. I mean, good God. She's just, ugh, incredibly brave. Honestly, people, this is how they view what they did. Incredibly brave. Breaking up a family for a non-binary, non-comedic comedian is incredibly brave to them. Lying to your husband, cheating on your husband, incredibly brave. Stunning and brave. Holy shit. Moving on. It's also hard not to see parallels between the dramatically divisive response the show's current iteration has received and the furor back when Sex and the City first premiered. Firebrand feminist academic Camille Paglia was a fan for its foregrounding of pro-sex feminism. Christian lobby groups less so. By the way, Camille Paglia, one of the most brilliant feminist writers ever. If you want I would love to hear what she has to say about And Just Like That. She probably would hate it. I guarantee you she'd hate it. In fact, I am calling on Camille Paglia to please write about And Just Like That, because this was the least pro-sex thing I ever saw in my whole life. It made sex ugly and repulsive, and Camille would hate that. Moving on. Feminist thinkers of all stripes continue to debate its credentials in advancing or setting back conversations around women's sexuality and financial independence. But what can be said unequivocally is that even with its blind spots regarding race and gender identity, the show has always been a backdrop for important conversations around women's progress in contemporary society. It's so funny when you've gotten used to something, it seems tame, says Nixon. And we were anything but tame. We got a lot of hate in the first few years, and even beyond that. A lot of people saying, women don't act like this. This is disgusting. These aren't real women. They're men in drag. Is this show feminist? Can you be a feminist if you wear high heels? I think that it was new and different, and people didn't always know what to think. And they didn't always know if they liked what the original show was saying. But now, of course, it's part of the culture. It's enshrined. And so I think people were looking for us to be a little more tame and benign, but that has never been our show. If you think that Sex and the City is a show that's really about footloose and fancy-free women shopping and having sex, I mean, and then she doesn't finish that sentence. So I guess she's saying it's not. But I think, yes, it was. And yes, there was some cultural stuff thrown in there, but it was about women finding love and in the big city and having fun and making friends. And it was not this heavy show that she is saying it was. It was not a heavy show in any way. And there really wasn't that much furor surrounding it. The only criticism it got that I remember was that they portrayed women as gay men, basically, because women did not generally act like Samantha Jones, which was probably true, although some women did, but I don't think it was a majority of women. But again, it was entertainment. It was supposed to be over the top. So I think people knew this is not reality. It's entertainment. But no, I don't think it was any big, heavy show saying anything important. Moving on. As to the debates that have swirled around her relationships with Steve and Che on the show, Nixon is equally philosophical. It reminds me very much of Carrie and some of her most seminal moments of being in love with Mr. Big and trying to make herself be in love with Aiden but having an affair, she says. Like I was saying before, a feminist show shouldn't be agitprop. It shouldn't be propaganda showing women as these sensible, wise, kind, attractive people. At this, Nixon breaks into a hearty laugh. First of all, who wants to watch that? I don't want to watch that. It's to show women and our struggles and our dreams and our foibles. You don't always know where you're going. Those are people that I'm interested in, not the people who are playing it safe. Let me go back for a second here. Who wants to watch attractive people? Everyone. Everyone. No one wants to watch unattractive people. No one wants to watch characters that we hate. No one wants to watch characters who are unkind. And I mean, unless that's the kind of show you're watching, which those kind of shows I really don't like that much. I hate it when when all the characters in a show are totally irredeemable. I don't find that interesting at all. And it wasn't the show that you had. Sex and the City was not about unlikable, unattractive people, but you turned it into that for reasons that I cannot fathom. Just because Cynthia Nixon doesn't want to watch a show about attractive, nice people, she wants to watch a show about unattractive bitches. Okay, gotcha. As I remind Nixon, though, there's a strong contingent of Sex and the City fans who loved the new iteration of the show for all its quirks and, yes, occasionally clunky moments. Who? Who are this strong contingent? Come on. I have not seen this strong contingent anywhere on YouTube. Have you? It's only the corporate media who keeps telling us that this strong contingent of fans who love this exist. We have not been able to find any of them, though. If you find any, please send them my way. I'd love to see this. For those who entered with a different set of expectations and allowed themselves to be drawn into its often moving meditations on grief, motherhood, and the emotional vagaries of middle age. Oh, God, that sounds awful. It proved to be the most profound chapter yet in the lives of the women we've grown to know so well over the years. Oh my God, the ass kissing. I feel like people who have been less sanguine about it were really looking for a rehash of the old show, Nixon says. If I could do anything differently, I would have made sure we said to people in letters 10 feet tall, this is not Sex in the City. If you're looking for Sex in the City, you should watch the reruns. This is a new show for this moment and for the moment in these original characters' lives. Oh, God damn. If you wanted to make a new show, then you should have just gone and made a new show, Cynthia, with different characters that we didn't already know, and then turn them into something else that we don't recognize. I mean, what a stupid choice that was. Moving on. It's clear that Nixon is proud of both the Gilded Age and Just Like That, and rightly so. Across an impressive career, both serve as feathers in the cap of her achievements as an actor. Oh, this is such ass kissing. It's hard not to get the sense, though, that for someone as restless as Nixon is, the question of what comes next is already creeping. It seems that at the moment her priorities lie mostly in catching up on time away from her family that the filming of both shows necessitated. As if to confirm that, Nixon's youngest child, whom she had with her wife, education activist Christine Marinoni, in 2011, can be heard happily playing in the background throughout our conversation. My son is very excited today, she observes at one point. Hey, Max, can you try and yell a little less? As to what, is that the transgender child she has? I hear she has a transgender child, which shouldn't be surprising to anyone. As to whether she might be drawn back into the political realm, however, Nixon is circumspect. I mean, I was very politically involved before I ran, and I'm still very politically involved, she says, but I really ran because no one else would run against Andrew Cuomo, because he was so famously vindictive that if you opposed him, whatever political career you previously had would be ended. So that's why I ran. I couldn't bear to have him run unopposed. Despite the circumstances that led to Cuomo eventually resigning in disgrace last year, Nixon isn't exactly dancing on his grave as a final act of one-upmanship. She did, however, take the opportunity to drop a zinger after he was stripped of his Emmys. The difference between me and Andrew Cuomo, Nixon wrote on Twitter, neither of us is governor, but I still have my Emmys. That's actually funny. He should never have won an Emmy for his COVID broadcasts. That was the most ass-kissing thing that the Emmys have ever done. Can you imagine giving him Emmys for that? Oh, God. As she continues to dominate our TV screens, there may be still more to come. Okay, that's that. You guys, the ass kissing is just too much. It's just too much, and I'm sorry that Vogue got into the ass kissing on this when they had such a great article that I read the other day that totally called out all of this bullshit with Miranda. And whatever, let me know what you think. What do you think of this article? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell because YouTube censors the hell out of me. So if you want to be notified when I have new broadcasts, you got to hit the bell. All right, I'll talk to you later. Let me know in the comments below what you thought. See ya.